Well, usually we have a little bit of fun banter at the beginning.
Yeah.
All right. Well, in a normal fashion, I'm Nate.
And I'm Rach.
This is Pew Pew time.
Pew pew.
Do you like my little flourish?
That was nice. We got to do a little sound effect with that too now.
Yeah, some sprinkling.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, unbelievably, we're all the way to episode 6. We've only got 2 episodes left of Ahsoka, and it kind of blows my mind. I feel like it's gone really fast. These short series, event style shows, doesn't give you
Yep.
the length that you got with something like the Clone Wars. But
Right.
boy, a lot of crazy stuff happened. I feel like we should probably just dig in. Rachel, you got the recap?
Yeah, we'll make it a quick one because we do have a lot to talk about. But obviously, in this episode, we meet Grand Admiral Thrawn and we meet Ezra. There's some journeys in between there, but that's the bulk of it. Those are the key points. Now let's dive in.
Wow. Hey, all right. Yeah. So there were a lot of interesting reveals here, right? First of all, we've been trying to sort of find the right format for our conversation and everything. One of the things that we've tried to do is do these themes and everything. Well, this time I really broke it down by like character things, like what was happening with these characters, what was happening with these characters, what was revealed with this person. So to begin with, we saw Ahsoka and Huyang inside the whale on the way to the other galaxy, which is like, again, to me, such a fun thing. I mean, it's like you think about Star Wars, there are a lot of complaints about repetition of storyline, that it's just sort of the same themes over and over a lot of the time. And I was like, this is something we've never seen before, like a whale eats a ship and goes to another galaxy. But anyway, there was one thing in that Ahsoka said that I wanted to comment on. She said something about, she was lamenting that Sabine hadn't just destroyed the map when Ahsoka told her to, and so there was this conversation with her and Huyang, and she said, like, none of this problem would be here, whatever, if she had just done what I wanted her to do, and then Huyang says, like, yeah, but then no Ezra too, and of course that's certainly what Sabine's been struggling with, is she couldn't give up her friend.
Sure.
But Ahsoka says she was fated to make that choice, which is an interesting phrasing. And I don't know, maybe I'm looking into it a little too deep. But the idea of fate, destiny, has been spoken of a little bit before in Star Wars, right? But fate, I feel like that's something that we only hear generally in reference with the witches, with the Nightsisters and that sort of thing. Right. They talk about the fates and that sort of thing, which is very witchy. Anyway, I thought that was an interesting line. But we can move on now to the witches, since that's next thing on our list here.
It's a good transition. Yeah, it is, for sure.
So first of all, gosh, man, we can't dig into everything. There's just so much. But
no,
we saw
there is. It's
what
true.
Looks like the ancestral home of the Dathomiri Witches, right? Which we call them Dathomiri Witches, or they call them the Dathomiri at one point.
The Dathomiri, yeah.
But they're also the Nightsisters. It's all, I guess, the same group, or the Nightsisters are an offshoot or something like that. But Morgan Elsbeth finally meets her ancestors, the witches, I guess, and they're called Great Mothers, which, there was the Night Sister. I think they called their leader the Great Mother or whatever. So it's like, I don't know if this is a ranking hierarchy sort of thing within, their group, but 3 of them.
Right.
And like they had apparently, they are the means by which Thrawn got his message to Morgan Elsbeth. There were some sort of cryptic lines about how Thrawn had been reaching out to her from far away. And that was interesting to me. I was like, how? Well, witches, that's how. So,
Right.
um,
Right.
yeah. But like, you know, they made it clear that Thrawn had been in contact with the other galaxy, and they made the comment that, I mean, they don't like Jedi, right? Now, that's not a huge surprise. I don't
Right.
expect the witches of Dathomir to like much of anybody.
Right.
But at one point, they looked at Sabine and they said, "It reeks of Jedi." And then later on, they say, "It is dangerous," whatever, which again is sort of funny. And I don't know if it's just kind of a slap in the face or whatever, but
Right.
certainly interesting that, like, through the Force, they can sense that she's a Jedi somehow.
Sure. Well, what's funny is I want to just interject there for a
Yeah.
second. They said it reeks of Jedi. I felt like they said it and then looked like everyone kind of looked at Sabine then.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of wondered about Baylan and Shin because, you know, there's some Jedi energy there that then kind of comes up later in a conversation with the
Sure.
witches that it's like, well,
Yeah.
you know, he's not a Jedi anymore. But, you know, and I'm
I
like,
parted with them long ago.
when they say it reeks of Jedi, right. Anyway, but I thought it was interesting because I'm like, well, yeah, Sabine, but if they're sensing Jedi, aren't they likely sensing the Force, which we don't know that Sabine really even has?
Yeah.
So are they maybe thinking it's Sabine, but really it's the other two that they're sensing?
Yeah.
Anyway, that was something that I thought was interesting.
Absolutely. The tricky thing with the witches to begin with is just that they don't use the Force in the same way that the Jedi or the Sith use it, right? And
Sure.
so it's just sort of in my mind. I mean, we have so few rules about how the witches can use the Force. It feels like the Wild West a little bit, that like they can just kind of make it up as they go, and there are no rules.
Yeah.
But
True.
yeah, I think. I mean, well, I think that they are referring specifically to Sabine, because then they send her away and they lock her up.
Right.
But
Right. For
certainly,
sure.
as we've said, I'm still holding out hope that that Baylan comes around in the end and does
Right.
the right thing.
Right.
But yeah, it was.
Well, I know we're going to
was,
transition, but I have a thought on Shin too that I want to mention when we get to that point. I know we're not quite there yet, but yeah.
Well, I wanted to say before we move on from the witches too. I think I've said this in a previous podcast, but I don't understand, and I've had my theories for a long time, that the witches were actually using Thrawn in order, the witches, and I meant Morgan, but now the witches and Morgan are clearly on the same page. But they're using this whole thing to bring about a change in the galaxy or something, but we're ultimately going to betray him or something like that. Now, I have not a lot of proof, but my theory has really just been around the fact that the witches on Dathomir, the Nightsisters, I believe they were wiped out at the order of Count Dooku, or maybe the Emperor. I don't remember exactly who it was, but
yeah, you mentioned that. I don't recall, but
it feels to me like these witches, who, as I recall, were sort of vengeful. They, they weren't like quick to make friends, So like, it just surprises me that they would so quickly join forces with, the last great of the Empire. You know what I mean? That why would they want to be friends with this guy who, is associated with the people who wiped out, their clan or whatever? Now, Thrawn is his own animal. There's no question. And he has
right.
This is something a lot of people have theorized about too, is that Thrawn's allegiance isn't only to the Empire and wasn't only to the Emperor. He's a Chiss, and so he's got his other his like heritage that he is he clings to, that he's very loyal to at a greater level even than his commitment to the Empire, I think. But
right.
I don't know. I've
and I think you make a good point
that they work together so much. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. I was just going to say, I think you make a good point there, and you kind of said it already, but I think the witches are using whatever they need to get the power they want back. And that means using Thrawn to get, somebody there to help them get to where they want to go. I mean, the truth is, it feels like Thrawn is the means to an end, not necessarily that he's the leader, but that the Great Mothers are using him to get what they want, to get back in power, to get whatever. And that's kind of more what I question. Not that Thrawn is going to be in charge, but that he's just a pawn in whatever their plan may be.
Yeah.
But who knows?
Well, it's funny. I mean, with everything we know about Thrawn, he is the last person I would imagine becoming a pawn in someone else's game, because he's known as this mastermind and everything. But that said, it would be a real twist. It'd be cool. Excuse me. So the witches said something about when they bring Sabine in, they bring the prisoner, and they said, I think to Thrawn, I can't remember who they said it to. They said she's a loose thread, and we didn't see it. Now again, threads and the whole fates, thing.
The fate all and all that.
Yeah. Reminds me of Hercules, actually. It was so funny when I heard thread. All I could think of was
thing. Yeah,
the three
witches,
fate
the
ladies
fates with the eyeball
eye that they pass around. Yeah. But they missed something, right? So a lot of this has been whatever they're foretelling what was to come and connecting with, with Morgan and everything across the galaxies. But it was interesting to me that certainly their vision isn't perfect, and then later on, they find out that there's someone else coming. You know what I mean? Carried by the travelers or whatever they call it. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to me, and they missed Sabine until she was there, which surprised me, or at least it seemed that way. Which makes I almost kind of wondered. I was like, is it because she's not force sensitive that they didn't even notice her, or something like that? I thought it was interesting.
Maybe.
But again,
this takes me back then to Baylan and Shin. They weren't expecting them either, sort of. There was this and who's this? They're just mercenaries.
Yeah.
Because there's that question that comes up of anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, certainly, Thrawn expected she would bring, a handful of people to run the ship or whatever. I mean, they might just be, in his mind, they were nobodies until he spoke up, But I thought that was interesting too. That there was this wait, you guys didn't talk about who you were bringing, even, when these guys are ex-Jedis, or at least Baylan is.
Right. Yeah.
But anyway, to wrap up our little witch category for the moment, they've made some sort of deal between Thrawn and the witches, that they're going to bring something back to the other galaxy, right? And they talk a little about the timetable, and she says it'll take 3 rotations or whatever. And they mention the catacombs, and then they're moving boxes out. Gosh, I'm knocking everything down here.
Yeah.
They're moving boxes out and loading them onto the big ring, apparently, right? Which is weird. And they're almost certainly caskets, coffins, whatever.
Seems that way, yeah.
Man, I'm telling you, there's so much to dig into here. We know that in the past, the witches have used some power, some evil force witch power thing, to resurrect the dead, right, in one form or another.
Right.
And they did that with Savage Opress, who was sort of brother to Darth Maul at one point in the...
Yep.
I think that was in Rebels.
Rebels.
Maybe
it was Rebels, yeah.
I don't know. No, because he's so much older then. I think it must have been Clone Wars.
Yeah. I think it was Rebels. Wait. It doesn't matter. Go ahead.
Yeah. But they're just loading these things in. Oh, and also what's his name? The Merrick or whatever, the guy, the Inquisitor-looking dude who turned into green dust, right? So that's witch magic too. So there's this certainly, they've got this power. So them taking all these back, it doesn't feel like a friendly, well, let's just go settle in a new galaxy. It feels I don't know, to me, let's go exact our vengeance for the death of the Nightsisters or something. But who knows? That said, I think everybody's pretty much on the same page that these have got to be Nightsister bodies, and the intention is to resurrect them. Now, I saw one guy on TikTok point out something that really I did not notice, but there was a sort of creepy rattling sound as one of them came through the foreground in front of the camera. He was this rattling of bones almost as it went past. I thought it was interesting.
Dark, that is interesting.
Kind of evil, but fascinating.
Yeah.
They're witches after all.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's a really interesting thing. And I still I have trouble imagining them working right alongside Thrawn, but maybe it's a sort of like, well, we need each other to get out of here, so this is what we're going to do,
Right.
But
yeah.
I found it fascinating, and I don't know. Yeah, my assumption is that it's going to be an army, so we'll see how that goes. Do you want to start the next one?
Sure. So then we're going to talk about Baylan and Shin and kind of their role in this episode. I think, what I kind of want to draw attention to is the interesting dynamic, I think, between the two that I see in this. I feel like we start to see Shin asking a lot more questions and almost like this. We've seen it a couple times of her, you ask, and this is a Jedi Padawan thing where it's like, oh, master, like, what about this? And that kind of thing.
Right.
But I feel like she's saying it more as like, wait, really? Like, that's what we're going to do? Are you sure? Like, did we, and I'm jumping ahead here a little bit, but one of the key things is this point at which, Sabine has been let go, given a, the Howler, her freedom, sort of. Yeah. Oh. The Howler. Yep. And then suddenly it's like, okay, like, you guys can go follow after him in a little bit, and we'll give her the chance to find Ezra if she gets to it. And then if she does, you can destroy them both. And it's kind of this, like, you can see Shin start to question all of this, it feels like, which is funny because I thought she was maybe the darker of the two in the beginning. She felt a little creepier to me. He seemed more regal and like real, and I don't know. But like she seemed just a little bit like crazier in the eyes, But in this episode, I really started to see more from her of this like even that comment she makes about like, I thought you were to honor your agreement. Like she turns to him like surprised, like, wait, you told her. And it was kind of like Thrawn was like, well, yeah, we're going to let her find him. Like I'm going to twist it. But even Baylan, you see in that moment as he's directed by Thrawn, he doesn't like nod. He just turns and like walks away from them. He turns away from the group and like walks away. And it's this, in my mind, it's this like he's fighting this battle between what he knows is right and what he is like doing for his job, sort of. You know what I mean? It seems like he, even just like the moments when he talks, when, because when they go out, then again, they're just kind of discussing. And that's when Shin is like, questions. Do you miss it? Like, do you miss the Jedi Order? Do you miss all of that? And, you can talk more to that because I know you had some thoughts on there, but it's just, you see her really starting to wonder if this is right, if this is what, because he's been teaching her to kind of do things the right way, but like for ourselves. And now she's going, but is this the right way? Like, is this how we're supposed to do it? So I really am interested in that kind of character development as, this talk of power, and Baylan even gets more into like, well, we're here and this is what we're going to build and we're going to have all this power. And she's kind of like, here, really? So anyway, that's my feeling on kind of what we're seeing in that partnership, that relationship. That development is interesting. So.
Yeah, again, each episode feels like it's brought us something different a little bit. And this one feels like it was all this like crazy little character detail stuff. And yeah, I think we've seen curiosity and a little bit of, I don't know if I would say doubt before, but something like that in Shin with Baylan in previous episodes. But this episode, it's like, she's really like, she's just full of questions. And and it's hard to know if it really is, like I said, curiosity or doubt, she says, won't our alliance with Thrawn finally bring us into power? And he says, that sort of power is fleeting. What I seek is the beginning so that I can finally bring this cycle to an end. And he's talking about the Jedi and the Sith and that sort of thing. Right. There are so many theories about what that means. One of them is, do you remember the, I can't remember their names. They're these like forced, quote unquote, gods type characters that are in a couple of episodes of the Clone Wars, the Mortis gods, I think they're called.
Oh, that sounds
and
familiar. Yeah.
and then they're on the wall in Rebels at the Jedi Temple on
Sure. Yeah.
Lothal, right?
Yep. On the phone.
They're like pointing and stuff, right? In this big mural.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, there is apparently this other character which I'm unfamiliar with. It's not been in the shows or movies or anything, but
Sure.
there's this character that's apparently a woman that acted. So it's the father, the son, and the daughter, right? The son represents the dark side, the daughter represents the light side, and the father
Yep. I
represents
remember
the
that.
balance or something, right?
Yeah.
But
Yep.
apparently there was another character that sort of almost ascended to that level of importance and acted as a mother to the children and whatever. I don't know, but became intensely, like, I think, evil and powerful. I don't know. I'm only gathering this from what I've heard other people say. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, so there's that kind of thing, and some people have said that person might be here and all this. It's all very interesting. But what he's talking about, what Baylan's talking about, seems to be, and up until this point, I wasn't sure that he was really this sort of like zealot almost for his cause, which we still don't understand. But
Right.
this one, it starts to feel like, look, I've got a plan, and we're going to tear this whole thing down, right? Like it's not just like, I'm going to kill all the Jedi. It's like, I'm going to make sure there can never be any more Jedi or something.
Right.
Jedi and Sith, that's all a thing of the past or something like that. It feels like that's what he's aiming at, which seems like a much bigger plot than I originally thought Baylan was really after.
Sure.
It's interesting, and it says that this planet is, a very significant thing. There's a lot of interesting things here to theorize, but I don't know. Who knows? Whether it's an artifact or a person or whatever. There's also, you mentioned the honoring the agreement and everything, and she asks a lot about the Jedi, the order, the past, and everything. And I almost wonder if she wishes she had been in the Jedi. You know what I mean? If she longs for the more honorable days and everything. It's a real twist for me.
That's how it feels. Yeah.
I mean,
it does seem that way.
Maybe that's how it would be if you worked with this sort of like the warrior poet who, waxes endlessly about, the old days of the Jedi and whatever. This sort of like the way he talks about it. Like there are times when it's like, well, he really does miss that,
There's a respect for it almost in the way he talks about it, even though he talks about how broken it was. I mean, all he's taught her is this, like, the honor of the Jedi Order and what it stood for and what it could have been. And so, of course, she's built that up in her mind. And it's no surprise that she kind of goes, why are we trying to get rid of that? Let's go back to what that was, kind of,
Maybe. I hope so. I think that'd be cool, too. I don't really want to see Baylan end up being the fully bad guy in the end, but it would be kind of cool, too, if Shin was the one that was like, nah, I'm going to be good.
Right.
But yeah, like he's taught her, built her up in this, like, we're here for money. You know what I mean? Like that's how we're going to get our power or whatever, And but the whole time, like in the background, he's been creeping into this idea of honor and whatever, the righteousness of the Jedi, that sort of thing. So it's very interesting. And who knows where that's going. He talks about, he says like, he misses the idea of it, whatever. And he says there was no future there. She says, and you see one here in this wasteland.
I love that.
Again, a little poignant there. But then he says, I see what once was the great kingdom, great witch kingdom of the Dathomiri, right? Which, again, the great witch kingdom, like, I didn't know there was a great witch kingdom ever, So, like, who knows? It says the existence of the great mothers confirms this. She says they seem to be eager to leave this place. Maybe we should too. And he says perhaps they fear a power greater than their own.
Yeah.
And he said, something calls to me. Can't you hear it? Something stirs. Can't you see it? I don't know. I love what's happening here. But I'm also like,
it's interesting.
From Shin's point of view, it's almost like, man, he's going off the rails. Like, what is happening here? Like this, like, it's as though she doesn't understand what's happening with him, and I find that interesting. Whether he's just becoming obsessed with this power or what, but it feels like they're not quite on the same page anymore, the two of them. So
absolutely, I think you see that just in even just her interactions with Sabine, kind of through this process of everything that happened with the map. And then, like, them taking her with them. I mean, I feel like there's this almost connection that you see when they fought in the woods. There was this moment, I can't remember exactly like what had happened.
Between Sabine and Shin.
Yeah, that it just suddenly, it felt like maybe there was this question of like, why are we fighting each other? Like almost this moment of like, are we really on opposite sides? And like I said, I can't recall the moment exactly, but I remember thinking that, and we never talked about it, but I see it more and more in like how she's interacting with things, that it's like almost this, I appreciate what Sabine is trying to do more than what my master is trying to do, almost like she sees more honor in what, Sabine's efforts are, and not understanding. And I don't feel like, and maybe we're just not seeing all of the story, but it feels like Baylan is being really cryptic, and it's like, does she know these old stories, or is he just saying like, oh, it's all the, this is we don't know, this is the stories of old and all this stuff, oh, the ancient whatever. And it's like, is she actually aware of what that means, or is he just being really cryptic on purpose, which it could be, but it's making her question. I think you were right. I think it's doubting. I don't think it's curiosity. I think it's shifted from curiosity to starting to kind of question his motives or whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
Could be. Well, you mentioned Sabine and them, they locked eyes a couple of times, even in like, excuse me, even in the shuttle on the way from the ring down to the planet, whatever. There's this moment where like they just kind of stare at each other. It's like there've been a lot of funny little like TikTok jokes about the two of them, just staring back and forth at each other intensely. Particularly Shin, who's got like crazy eyes. Yeah. I really don't know what to expect out of all that. Baylan has, I think, been really cryptic, and I don't know if that's like he's just like, well, you don't need to know yet, or whatever. The Jedi Master Padawan relationship. It was not always like, I'll tell you all the details. Trust. It's like, this is what we're doing, and you're coming along, and I'll tell you as we go. As you need to know these things. So it could just be something like that. But it does feel like if you were going to go to another galaxy and your master was going to claim some great power, tear down the Jedi and Sith dynamic and all like huge things, wouldn't he tell you a little more about it and what was going to be necessary and that sort of thing?
Right.
But I don't know. Yeah, it's crazy. Are you ready to move on to Thrawn?
Sure.
So this is a big one. This is one of the biggest character reveals, of course, was that of Grand Admiral Thrawn. First, we see the Chimera, which is his Star Destroyer, approaching that whatever great like pillar tower thing. Yeah, that they're all standing on top of, and it comes and then just lowers down, and so like the cargo bay where ships would park just lowers down on top of that, and they just like walk out onto it basically. Oh, so cool. But they did you heard the Thrawn had this like pipe organ theme that you hear play a little bit as it approaches and as he comes out, and it's pretty cool.
It's kind of cool.
But it also, I wrote down, it feels wilder. It doesn't feel as maybe I'm reading into it a bit, but it doesn't feel as like precise and like
organized,
and, like, meticulous as and I wonder if they're hinting at a change in his character. For what it's worth, he does not seem very different in terms of personality. He's still very calculating and very thoughtful and that sort of thing.
True. But anyway, even the stormtroopers look wilder, when you talk about that energy, and they all have like the red and everybody's, it's chaotic almost. There's still order, but it's like you said, this wilder kind of feel. Something is,
Yeah. Well, I had taken something that I've since gone back on. I wrote it in my notes here, but then I've seen other people talking about it, and I think they're right. I saw the red, they had all these like stripes and everything. I thought it was like a tribalism. Like it almost looked like it mimicked the Chimera like illustration on the bottom of his ship. Like I thought it was like sort of a tribal, like this is our like an identity thing. But more and more, I've seen people say, well, they're actually wraps. They're like red cloth.
It's like fabric. Yeah.
But it matches what the Nightsisters wear. It's the red that they wear, right? And of course there are some theories, but I think that pretty much everybody's on the same page that probably these stormtroopers aren't completely alive or human anymore, right? At least most of them,
Right.
maybe all of them.
Right.
So you got these guys with is it Kintsugi, the Japanese art where they if you break a cup,
With
they
the
can
gold.
they use gold in the cracks and
Yeah.
everything, and the idea is it rebuilds it in a more beautiful way. Anyway, it's a very interesting concept, but you see a little of that in their armor and everything, little bits of
The gold. Yeah.
it looks like gold or something, and holding their bits of armor together and everything. And these guys are like beat up, right? So we don't know why they're in the shape that they are. It's been some years, and he talks about like they don't have the army that they used to have, right? So who knows what's happened to them, but clearly they've been fighting something.
Yeah.
I mean, like, again, their armor's all busted up. There's the new guy who we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, so the going theory is that these guys have been resurrected or something by witch magic, because they look, like you said, wilder too. It's sort of like it's a scary looking thing. They don't even I mean, like, there was something scary about the perfect uniformed guys, all in the same position, the sort of control that they displayed with that. But this is more like wild and dangerous in that way. I think it's very interesting. And again,
what's interesting,
it shows how much he's had to rely on the witches throughout this ordeal. So
see,
how deep
that's
their
what I was going to
deal
say.
goes is question.
Yeah, what I was going to say was, so I noticed it was red fabric, and I immediately thought, oh, well, they are controlled by the witches now, by the Great Mother, like, because it's the red of like their cloaks. And so to me, I mean, the thought of them maybe being somewhat resurrected or part witch magic or whatever, that makes sense. But in my mind, it was like, this isn't Thrawn's army. This is an army controlled by the Great Mothers. That's how it felt, even though he still is like in charge. We're talking about who is really in charge. And the red kind of makes me think that this is how they're claiming this is our army now, sort of. Anyway, I don't know if that's the case.
Yeah, maybe.
But that was one of the things that and it could be because of that. Like you said, that if the witches have done some kind of, healing, whether they're human, whether they're whatever, we don't know. But I think to me, it signified maybe more who's in charge, sort of. But
right. It could be. I mean, that sort of thing could be symbolic of a certain level of control. That'd be an interesting thing too. And I mean, like, that opens up other questions too. Like, Grand Admiral Thrawn looks untouched, other than not looking quite like his actual, character
I
himself,
was
whatever,
disappointed.
because he's not animated. I honestly, seeing the photos beforehand, I was like, man, I don't know. But more and more, like, when I heard his voice, I was like, all right, I'm on board. Like, I think it was totally the right decision to get someone to get the guy who did the voice rather than to try to get somebody who looks like the character more.
See, and that's where
the voice was the more.
I'm with you there. Yeah, I do think that the voice was iconic and very, like, that's a meaningful kind of component. It did bother me a little bit because Thrawn is a very, like, sunken, like, face, and I felt like the animated version of him was kind of, cartoony, right? So, like, these characters, we can't make them look like there aren't people who always, but that kind of almost gaunt look that I felt like Thrawn had. He was a very like narrow build. I thought there was something kind of creepy about that. And this guy was like, I don't know, just a blue grandpa,
He looks too much like a real person.
Like weird. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I want him to look
Blue
like
Elon,
the cartoon character.
Called him.
Yeah, exactly. That's so funny. Yeah.
Everybody thought he looked like blue Elon Musk, and that cracks me up.
He definitely did. I can see it.
And I mean, like, I agree. It would be nice if he was as thin and, like, if his cheeks were a little more sunk and his face was a little extended.
And this
but
actor is not fat.
If it had to be
I want to clarify
or the other,
that. Right. It was like this was a more important component. I agree,
to be honest,
yeah.
I feel like his uniform could have been tighter. He could have been made to look a little more svelte, probably, if they were trying harder. But again, I don't think that was like the thing that they needed.
Priority.
So I'm happy enough that it went as it did.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. So, excuse me. Clearly, we've seen some changes among the stormtroopers. It's all been. It's interesting and mysterious. Like, they Baylan talks about like what are they running from, right? So it does make me wonder: is there something here that they've been trying to keep at bay until they can leave, right? And obviously they want to get out of there because they've been trapped here for a long time, and they just want to get
Sure.
back, and they want to find the other Imperial remnants and whatever, So it just
Right.
makes sense. They want to go home. But it does make me wonder, these guys are so beat up. What is it that they've been fighting? That
Right.
like, cause all we've seen on this planet are like some beasts and some like kind of nothing little turtle creatures and everything. So it's kind of,
Well, and there's
he's not fighting the witches,
weird
it seems, unless there are
natives.
factions of witches. I suppose that's possible. So
Sure.
there is. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Sorry. I just meant like we've seen this kind of native group that's in some kind of armor of some kind, but we don't know if that's just a minor kind of component. I can't remember.
Sorry. I don't
No,
know.
go
They're
ahead.
like bandits. I don't know. Yeah, there were some
bandits.
guys. I'd forgotten entirely about those guys.
Right.
They have, they're ambushing and that sort of thing. And I don't know where they came from, either. We don't know.
Right.
I mean, they're like humanoid, I think, but like we don't know if they're humans or if they're some other faction that's been on this planet for thousands, tens of thousands of years. Who knows? I mean, I don't know. I had forgotten, I guess, about them. That's an interesting point. But I don't think that they're. I mean, from what we saw
any power.
with Sabine, they don't seem like the threat. Yeah.
Right.
So I don't know. It feels like there's another player here that we haven't been introduced to, and I'm interested to see who that is.
Agreed.
But let's talk about Enoch, which I found it really interesting. Dave Filoni has used a lot of biblical names in his in Rebels and everything. So Ezra, of course, is a biblical name. Canaan is I mean, not spelled the same way, but it is a place in the Bible. It's very interesting to me. And now Enoch, which is another biblical name. I find it interesting that this has been like a theme ongoing, but it could just be that he picks and chooses names that sound cool and old and unusual, right?
Sure.
He's introduced as the captain of Thrawn's guard, and he's got like I don't know if I wish I had a. Do I have a? Give me a second. So he's like a stormtrooper, right? But like the whole face is missing, and they've put in. Sorry, I'm too close to the microphone. Put in. They've made a gold mask that fits over that looks like a human face, and it reminds me of. There's a. I know it's not only in this, but there's a character in Gladiator that Maximus fights that has this silver mask
Very
that he
similar.
pulls on. But it's really cool. There are a number of historical, I think, whether they're fighters or soldiers or just like funerary masks that do that kind of thing. I find it very interesting. And that gold, it's so cool. And the interesting thing too is Thrawn always had an interest in art. He was always he had an interest in local cultures and art, and he followed Sabine's work, and he talked about Hera's Kalikori and like the significance of. I think it's really interesting that like now his guys have these like weird bits of
his
like
arm are all
art
artistic
added to their bodies, and maybe it's just holding them together like Scotch tape, or maybe it's a little more decorative. I don't know.
Sure.
I imagine it's mostly like supposed to be mechanical, but the face is so cool, and I'm guessing that's more decorative, and maybe it's a sign of his station or something like that. I don't know.
Sure.
But I thought that was really cool.
It was.
And then we hear his voice. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
The character, there's this sort of like recently anyway, a long history. I don't know, maybe always, of cool characters and like cool helmets and everything, and characters that you want to know more about, and then they just die.
Right.
So, like, take Boba Fett, the original Boba Fett, for instance. That like he was everybody's obsession, and you watched him die. He had like less than 5 minutes of screen time in the whole of the original trilogy. And probably less than 3. I don't know. He's not there much. But anyway, he died, and then more recently, Captain Phasma. Everybody was really obsessed with her, and then she amounted to basically nothing. A lot of characters like that. Anyway, So
Yeah.
even this Marek or whatever his name was, like everybody was super excited and everybody wondered who he really was under the mask and everything. It's like, nope, he's just dead. He's witch magic, whatever.
Right.
But anyway, I find it very interesting that we're introduced to a new character, and he seems like he could be an important character, but who knows? We'll probably just see him die in another 2 episodes.
Probably. Yeah.
But his voice was sort of his voice was sort of inhuman a bit, and it seemed a little bit mechanical. I don't know. It was gravelly, but like, gosh, it was cool.
Slightly robotic or something.
He helps. He helps Sabine up onto her growler and is like giving her like advice and stuff. And I was like, maybe this guy's kind of cool, you know?
Right.
He's like, you know, the sort of BA whatever, warrior respects warrior sort of thing or whatever. You know?
Right. Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, why don't you take the next thing?
All right. So I think a really interesting point, final thought kind of on Thrawn and this interaction we have with him, which isn't super intense for the whole episode. I mean, he is intense in his nature, which I think is so interesting. And one of the things that you mentioned is, you know, it's when he, you know, lays eyes on Sabine and his, you know, what a delight it is after all this time to see a familiar face. And it's this eerie kind of feel. And I love what you said, his scary charm, this idea that like, you know, he's got this weird kind of energy that, again, and this helps with the character voice, you know, being perfect, you know, because you couldn't, it takes a certain person to talk the way Thrawn talked. And that's exactly what they needed. So that was so important. Right. And it's this idea that like, you know, he still has this weird kind of, conversational, like he cares or something, but he, you know, he doesn't. And, you know, he's still all for himself, but he's still kind of polite and creepily, you know, charming, like you said. And then it's interesting, you know, just kind of the next step here of this conversation to finish up Thrawn, is that, you know, there's this moment when there's this like, oh my gosh, we're sensing somebody else is coming. And there's a, like, even Thrawn is like, could it be the recently deceased Ahsoka Tano or however he says that? I can't remember if he says Ahsoka Tano or if he says like, whatever, Lady Tano or something. Anyway, but, you know, suddenly Morgan is like, oh no, like there's no way, you know? And I love kind of her sheepish, like suddenly she's not the big hardcore, you know, whatever. Suddenly she's the pawn and she's like, oh, there's no way it couldn't be her. Like she's gone. And Baylan assured me that she was dead. And it was that kind of like, where you start to go, well, he didn't really want her killed anyway. He threw her off the ledge and it was like, yeah, she's gone. You know, I mean, he said it would be such a shame, right, to kill her at one point or however he phrased it a couple episodes ago. And anyway, but, you know, Thrawn is then saying what he needs the magic of the witches once more. And it's like, well, what does that mean? The witches helped in what way, you know, to save him, to save his army? What happened? Again, there's that, like, what is it that they're being saved from? And what is it that he needs then when Ahsoka's coming? Power, something. Anyway, it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah. No, you're right. And he certainly used their help to reach out to Morgan Elsbeth and try to get this, like, you know, ride home, basically, you know, to call us intergalactic Uber. But then there's also, like we said, we suspect that he's maybe healed up his people, healed or resurrected or whatever. Thanks to the help of the Nightsisters. But what else? You know what I mean? Like, it could be a lot of things that he's leaned on them for in this time. So who knows? Gosh, I'm interested to see that.
And it's really just so up in the air. Charm. I mean, it's left. Yeah. Well,
I love the way Thrawn's always been, and there's a certain amount I mean, like, him being friendly and charming and kind, like when people are prisoners and everything, like there is a certain like cordiality to it that like you never see among the Empire, you know. I
Right.
mean, you see maybe a little of it in Grand Moff Tarkin or something like that, where he's just kind of like
Sure. That's
polite
true.
but snarky and throw her in the dungeon, you know, whatever. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but he is like, there's something about him. You mentioned, I mean, again, his interest in art and culture and that sort of thing, and like asking people about things and that, like
Right.
learning about them and their culture and everything. Like, a lot of that is strategic, but it rides this line with like, are you kind of a nice person? Like, what's happening
Right.
here? I don't understand.
Yeah.
But he's also like an incredible tactician, right? And so he just knows that by knowing his enemy, you know, he can learn to outthink them and outsmart them and
Sure.
predict their actions and that sort of thing. And that's exactly what he's done here with Ahsoka. You know, like he's like, look, the Jedi. Oh, and there's the other hint: the Jedi and or whatever the witches and the Jedi are both known for their resurrection acts or whatever like that. And there was a sort of like, yeah, there's a little hint maybe at what's happened with his stormtroopers.
Sure.
I find it very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is funny too that like Morgan Elsbeth is just the newest in a long line of commanders who have disappointed
Yeah.
Grand Admiral Thrawn. You know, you remember watching Rebels and like, you know, like, oh, this person, like, yeah, I mean, like for a while it was Agent Callus, and then or whatever.
Sure.
The replacement Imperial Governor of Lothal, the woman who like suddenly was like they're like out to get her, and then it was Agent Callus, and then later on it was Price, but who's the guy with the dark mustache? I can't remember his name.
Oof.
But whatever.
I don't remember either.
All these different people who like, oh yeah, like don't worry, I'll get your rebels for you, Thrawn.
Right.
And then like before long, he's like looking at them, like asking them questions that they're like, I don't want to answer that because I'm a failure. You know, it's all very interesting. I love that stuff. Anyway, it's just he is a fascinating character, and I'm so excited to see how this plays out farther. But we got to move on to the search for Ezra. So
yes.
Sabine, you know, she rides here along with the bad guys, and then she faces the Nightsisters and all that, or the witches, the Great Mothers. Then she gets put in prison, and then they basically like let her go, and they say like, well, you know, like go find Ezra. You know, we'll give you this dog horse, and you get going. And you know, they basically tell her like, you're free to go find your friend, but we're leaving, so you're trapped here. Like they basically say that, you know, and so I don't know. It's sort of confusing to her.
Sure.
But again, this is where Sabine starts to get a little bit annoying to me. I don't know. We don't have to go through all this stuff. We're running out of time here.
I feel like that whole scene with her and her journey to find Ezra, it was quirky, and yeah, there's some stuff, but it's like, it was
Well, the one thing I would say is, there's not a lot of detail there that's super important. She survives an ambush. There was a moment where she's shooting around with her Mandalorian blasters. You know, she doesn't have her helmet because you know, it got left on the planet when they you know, took her prisoner.
Took off.
But her blasters fail her, like they get shot out of her hands and stuff, and eventually she just takes out her lightsaber and fairly quickly takes them all out, right? She rides this howler, and it's really fun. They have this like the dynamic there was really cute. That like, you know, the howler it looks like seriously a mix between a horse and a dog. This great big thing.
I actually thought of an ROUS from the Rodents of Unusual Size. It looks like a large one of
from
those.
Princess Bride.
So
it does
Princess Bride, Anyway,
but yeah, no, it had its own little personality, and like when things got scary, it ran away, and then it came crawling back, and she was like, "No, you abandoned me, or whatever, cute. You know, you bailed on me." Anyway, it was fun seeing that dynamic. The next thing I wrote was the crab oysters are real dorks. It was so funny to see those guys like stand up and they're like turtle people with
they were dressed like hobbits.
Mixed in.
Felt like it was
I thought the same thing.
Hobbiton.
They're wearing like little vests and stuff. Anyway, they recognize her, the symbol of the
rebellion.
The rebellion, which is later the symbol of the New Republic, I think, and they take her to their little camp, and it turns out Ezra's there. It's really exciting. I was, I mean, like, I wasn't impressed with the hologram of Ezra. It just didn't feel
I know
right,
we
didn't look
talked
right,
about
whatever.
that. Yeah.
Part of that was probably because they were trying to make him look young, and they're trying to whatever, you know what I mean. And he's like, it was the same actor, I imagine. They were just trying to make him look young in this little thing, and they didn't figure the detail didn't matter that much. But
Sure.
I thought it was great. I really liked.
I agree.
How much he looked like real Ezra, how much he sounded like Ezra.
Mm-hmm.
I
Even in
like
the
that
eyes.
I like that he's got beard and hair. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that he looks like he's kind of been out in the wilderness for a while. He's wearing some cool new clothing, but I thought it was really well done. But then he's like, Sabine, whatever, and he said like, well, it took you long enough, whatever, and they have their hug, which again, I don't know. We don't need to push it, but is there going to be a little romance between them? Are they He had a crush on her for like a long time in the show. He was always like, oh, hey, Sabine, when she'd come by and stuff. It was like sort of funny, but like, they also sort of became brother and sister over all these years. So
sure.
Anyway, that's that. Do you want to cover that last point?
Sure. I think, an interesting final thought, and really where we end is this, like, as you were saying, Ezra's like, took you long enough. And she's like, yeah. And he's like, how'd you get a howler? And it was kind of like, I don't want to talk about any of that. We'll figure that out later. Let's just catch up. And it's this awkward, like, at some point, she's going to have to admit that the way she got there is now allowing Thrawn to get back. And he's all excited to see her. And it's like, I feel like there's not a lot of time to kill here. You got to, like, share what's going on and get back. Because she doesn't know that Ahsoka's coming. She doesn't know that any of that is happening. And, again, we don't really know what her plan was in finding Ezra. It was like, well, yeah, I want to find him, but then what? So I think that's just it. Obviously, it ended in a very cliffhanger moment of like, well, Ahsoka's coming. We've got Ezra now, and let's see what happens. So.
Yeah, she's like, I found you. Can't I just have a moment to be happy that I found you? Like, and it's like, I get it, man. I do. Yeah, we've talked a lot about. Sabine's had a pretty rough time of it. Like all of her her literal family's apparently dead now. From what we understand, she's lost a lot of friends. Everybody's is gone. She's been alone. She was even abandoned briefly by her Jedi Master situation. It's just like, boy, things kind of suck. I can understand you just wanting to appreciate a win.
Just for a moment,
But take a breath.
For sure.
And then tell them, we got to go now.
We got to go right now.
Like there is one way here and one way back. And if we're going back, we got to go now.
Right. Exactly.
And Ezra.
It was a great episode. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, Ezra said something implying that he plans to go back. I didn't know how much he would know when she got here, because I assume he's grown more powerful in the Force. I mean, he could be like a really legit Force user at this point.
Sure.
So I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens. But, I wondered if he was going to be like, I'm glad you're here, but now we have to stop the bad guys or something like that. But he's like, hey, I'm glad you're here. Like, when do we leave? Like, just kind of like unaware, apparently.
He may know more. He may know more than he's letting on, but who knows?
Yeah.
So, anyway.
So that was a crazy big episode, and I feel like we covered a lot of ground basically as quickly as we possibly could. But I'm so excited for this next episode, too. I'm just sad because it's just about over. We've got this next episode and one more after that, and that's it.
And that's it.
We'll see how this all wraps up. I'm really excited about it. You got any more thoughts?
Likewise. I don't think so. I think we're good.
All right. Well, if that's it, I'm Nate.
And I'm Rach.
And it's Pew Pew time. Thanks for coming.
Pew pew. See you later. Pew pew pew.